My name is Joe Wilkins. I happen to be one of the senior judges for the session, and we are delighted. Along with me, we have Christopher and Travis, and I think Michael will be joining us as well. And so we are again excited and delighted to have you with us. We are ready to listen intently to your presentation. I have a few opening comments that kind of set the tone for what we're expecting and looking forward to. So to begin with, this is part of the competition. And you are taking on a fictitious business identity and assigning a fictitious business identity to us as judges. And so I think you've called on us to walk together board of directors. So that's who we are as you're speaking to us. And please make sure that everyone knows who you are before you begin your presentation. You will have exactly 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. And so we really want to hear from you on the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem. During this time, we will not interrupt you. You will have 25 minutes of solid time to discuss and present. When you're finished, then we'll stay in character as judges and ask you questions for about 10 to 15 minutes about your presentation and questions that might be in our mind. And then you need to also stay in character as you respond to those questions. And then after that, we'll close the session, and then we'll have some Q&A and some feedback and some dialogue and just sort of coaching and feedback for you for your presentation. So with that, are there any questions before we get started? Okay, so we got exactly 25 minutes, and I have here, we're here in California, I have at 4:19, so 19 after the hour, 25 minutes from now. Okay, we'll put up 2 minutes just before we end. All right, so you may begin. Thank you.
Hello, I'm here to represent Impact Consulting Group. My name is Hyun.
Hey, man.
It's an honor to finally speak to your executive team. Have you felt like you were locked in a closet during this time of pandemic? Did you feel frustrated because you cannot travel as much? Such a sense of isolation is something that people with disabilities deal with every day. People with disability also want to dip their feet in the ocean. This is a recent headline from the local newspaper. We are focusing on persons with reduced mobility, hereinafter referred to as PRM, and their population account for 2.5 million in South Korea. From the picture at your right, the person cannot dip his feet in the ocean because there are no adequate structure for him to reach the ocean. The sand prevents him access. We first investigate the social problem through legal, financial, and ethical lenses, and then we map our relevant stakeholders. For the final part of our presentation, we provide customized solution for each problem. According to recent Korea Consumer Agency survey, 93% of persons with reduced mobility desire to travel domestically. However, only 6.8% of PRM have domestic tourism experience. Our social problem touches on multiple SDGs. First, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities is our primary goal. In particular, 11.7 aims to provide universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public space for women, children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. Also, our social problem briefly touches upon SDG 10 and 17. To achieve these goals, we need to alleviate multiple barriers. Based on the criteria of World Tourism Organization, we explore 3 barriers that prevent accessible tourism: physical, information, and perceptual barriers. First, physical barriers. The accommodations in South Korea is unfriendly toward persons with reduced mobility. It is challenging for PRMs to navigate through threshold, the corridors, and stairways. The majority of accommodation do not provide wheelchair ramps, lower shower booth, and handlebars that provide easy access to PRMs. There are some hotels that provide accessible rooms, but they comprise less than 3% or next to none. 74.1% of persons with reduced mobility responded that they were challenged to travel due to inadequate facilities. Among 500 tourist attractions, only 9 sites were considered adequate for tourists with reduced mobility. In terms of transportation, Jeju Island, which is one of the top tourist attractions in Korea, has only 2 rental cars with driving aid, despite operating over 30,000 commercial rental cars. Second, information barriers. Despite enjoying high internet and smartphone accessibility, persons with reduced mobility do not have the same level of information as everyday travelers. To provide quality information for PRM, we need to customize the tourist guide brochures, mobile apps, and so on. Most PRMs own smartphone devices and have access to internet. However, they lack information regarding tourist attraction, restaurant, travel park, travel routes, and local facilities that they can access. People are largely ignorant to daily struggle of travelers with reduced mobility. To test our hypothesis, we conducted an online survey and received 111 responses. More than half noticed PRMs at travel location, but only about 1/4 recognized the challenges faced by PRMs. The low public awareness is likely to be a result of poor educational system and a lack of certification for accessible tour guides. In fact, only 53% of tourism workers received disability awareness training. Therefore, our purpose is to create tourism without barriers. We aim to create over 500 accessible tourist attractions in Korea by 2040 by alleviating the physical, information, and perceptual barriers. And now we are going to move on to the analysis section of our site. Tamin?
Oh, thank you, Soyun. Now let's look at the legal implication of our analysis. The Act on Prohibition of Discrimination in Tourism Against Persons with Disabilities only require information and guidance on the use of tourist facilities and access to tourist attractions for the disabled. Thus, it lacks detailed text to enforce tourism businesses to provide convenience facilities necessary for access, movement, and use for people with disabilities. Thus, we recommend amendment to include a new clause to enforce convenient facility provision for access, movement, and use for tourism activities. Also, the Act on Prohibition of Discrimination in Tourism Against Persons with Disabilities require hotels, condominiums, and international conference facilities to establish convenience facilities by March 20th, 2025, and the rest 2030. This decree has several limitations. First, due to retroactivity, the convenience requirement is not applicable to facilities built prior to the legislation of 2018 Act. Second, it lacks practicality. 4 or 5-star hotels and international conference facilities are not primary travel accommodations for the disabled. Third, grace period does not meet the global standard. Globally, the grace period for enforcement is about 5 years. The amendment was passed in 2018, and 2023 provides 5 years grace period for accommodations. Thus, we recommend the enforcement year to be brought forward to 2023 and to 2025 respectively. Act on Guarantee of Promotion of Convenience of Persons with Disabilities, the aged pregnant woman obligates accommodation of facilities to reserve at least 1% of the total number of bedrooms for the disabled. However, the current law does not obligate tourist accommodations to provide convenient services beyond minimum lodging requirements. Thus, we recommend obligating tourist accommodations to provide detailed information on the rooms available to the disabled when making reservations online. Also, we want to enforce one or more shuttles devoted to wheelchair users. Due to our time limitations, we only discuss potential amendments for the hotel businesses, but in the future, we need to discuss amendment in travel agencies, tourist use facilities, international conferences, casinos, amusement facilities, and tourist convenience facilities. Now we go on to our ethical analysis. Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights asserts that everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. However, according to our survey, only 12.4% of the disabled population get to ever travel. Thus, we plan to provide services to improve accessible tourism infrastructure. Second, as a society, we have obligation to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of people with disabilities. However, in our survey, 76.3% of the respondents were totally unaware of the disabled population in South Korea. Thus, we provide awareness training opportunities and media coverage to improve social awareness. And partnership. Organizations around the world have begun to see collective impact as a new and more effective process for social change. However, there has been low partnership efforts among different stakeholders due to their disparate priorities. We organize multiple stakeholder initiatives to combine each organization expertise. To highlight the expertise of each partner, we now turn to stakeholder mapping. Minju?
Prior to financial analysis, it is important to look at our stakeholders. We use economics of mutuality framework made by Oxford and Mars Cooperation in 2016. We use the stakeholder mapping to identify stakeholders and explore individual objectives, pain points, capabilities, and relationships. Through this framework, we aim to have collective efforts needed to address pressing social problems. To develop solutions and detail stakeholders that are needed to reach out our purpose, tourism without barriers, we have mapped out our stakeholders. We classified them into 4: public, private, NGO, and people. To further elaborate the stakeholder mapping by prioritizing them, we have classified them into primary and secondary stakeholders. The bold line, who are primary stakeholders, are essential in solving the problem. And the faint line, who are secondary stakeholders, can either act as beneficiary or supporter. Let's briefly look at our primary stakeholders. Our consultees' mission is making a better world for people with disabilities. Their main business model are tailored social projects and campaigns. Walk Together is doing many social projects in Korea, but also in foreign countries. And their parent company, Hanmi Global, has expertise to construction. Airbnb and Yanulja are user-friendly accommodation apps that have a lot of users. SoCar has vehicles for car rental service. They are the biggest car sharing platform in Korea. Naver is the equivalent of Google in Korea. Therefore, we suggest 3 solutions in light of our stakeholders. First, we need to alleviate the physical barriers for accommodations. Walk Together and their parent company, Hanmi Global's main expertise are renovation and social campaigns. By partnering with Airbnb and Yanulja, they will gather information about accessibility from each host and renovate their accommodations upon request. Then, accommodation applications can provide updated information for PRMs. When they do so, Walk Together will provide incentives such as barrier-free certificates and digital marketing supports. This process will benefit PRM and others who need barrier-free accommodations and information. We aim to reach 1.3 million PRMs and others in Korea. Based on accumulated data, Airbnb and Yanulja can potentially branch out to overseas operation in East Asia. Next, we need to discuss physical barriers regarding transportation. To find solution for transportation, we interviewed an employee of SoCar. The employee answered that the company is looking to diversify their rental car services to taxi industry. Since SOCAR has surplus vehicles and pursuing social values, we connected work together to provide data regarding the demands of PRMs. In addition, by partnering with Walk Together, SOCAR can sell and promote their services to Walk Together's diverse network and stakeholders. Secondly, we aim to alleviate information barriers. Persons with reduced mobility need more information about tourist attractions. The residents and tourists are by far most familiar and knowledgeable experts. Walk Together can gather detailed information from them by hosting volunteering programs. Then, provide information to neighbor for making an online accessible map. With this gathered information, they can also inform the local governments about facilities such as travel routes, ramps that are needed to be managed. And this system will not only benefit PRMs, but also seniors, which are expected to take up half of our population by 2065. So this is an example of an accessible map. Moreover, we aim to alleviate the perceptual barriers through education. Walk Together has expertise to improve perception against people with disabilities through educations. Therefore, they can educate tour guides, hosts, and residents. Last but not least, to alleviate the perceptual barriers through media. We can improve awareness through collaborations with YouTubers and social media influencers.
Thank you, Minju. Now we move on to our financial analysis. Through our multi-stakeholder initiative, we plan to conduct a pilot study in Jeju Island. After our 3 years of testing, we plan to scale up to other regions. In terms of funding, we need about $370,000 to implement our first-year project. The funding will be allocated into 3 main projects, including infrastructure building, accessible map creation, and education program. In terms of infrastructure building, we plan to hire software developers and data analysts to design add-ons or plugins to improve the UI of commercial application by customizing it for the disabled users. We plan to renovate 50 rooms for 23 3-star hotels in Jeju Island over a 3 years period. This covers 12% of the total accommodation capacity in Jeju Island. For accessible map design, we'll create a website that integrates a crowdsourcing model for any individual to pitch in to our accessibility map design. We'll also devote our funding to YouTube stars to create social experiments and awareness videos. We forecast that our first 2 years of expenditure would increase. However, once we finish creating apps and educational programs, we'll incur less expenses in the future. To meet our funding requirement, about 40% of our funding would be self-financed by Walk Together and Hanmi Mobile. Another 30% would be financed by Korean Tourism Organization, which is the Korean government. The rest of the funding would be collectively supported by our commercial partners, SOCAR, Korail, and Naver. The reasons for their funding is explained on the next slide. Through our partnership, we plan to establish a sustainable ecosystem for accessible tourism. Airbnb and Yanolja will attract users domestically and also globalize their platforms through the acquired user data. Naver will improve the accessibility of map services and potentially attract more users. SOCAR will expand their businesses into taxi industry by making their vehicles more accessible. The EU Commission estimated the economic value of 830 trillion euros for accessible tourism in the future. Similarly, PRMs have large economic potential for Korean economy. Furthermore, accessible tourism can benefit the elderly or children with limited mobility. By 2065, it is expected that 42% of the Korean population will be over the age of 65. So accessible tourism is bound to have more economic benefits and applicability in the long run. Thank you for listening.
Okay, wonderful. And we are actually in plenty of time. So you got done pretty effectively and efficiently with your presentation. So thank you very much. So a few questions from the board to kind of get started. I'll just start out with, again, just sort of recapping the part of your presentation that broke down both the legal analysts as well as the ethical dimensions of the challenge. And you noted that you cited a few legal statutes that are on the books there. I think Act 15272 and then 13805. And I just want to make sure I understand that that these legal statutes that they're not being violated. I think what I'm hearing is that the tourist industry is not violating. They're doing what they are doing according to the act, but you're recommending that there's an effort to amend these laws. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that's what you're proposing. And then I'll pause there. Then I'll ask a question around ethical, and then I'll get on with other judges for their comments and feedback. So, give me some sense on the legal laws.
Oh, thank you. To clarify a little bit more on that, we are suggesting to add new amendments to the existing laws because the current law only requires the tourism facilities, the information and guidance that is required for accessible traveling. And that is, it does not enforce the tourism facilities to integrate convenience facilities in their facilities. So the current law is quite vague as to how to inform and improve the accessibility requirements for the people with disabilities. That's why we're suggesting to include the enforcement part, the convenience, that enforcement part that obligates facilities to design the convenience facilities and aiding facilities for this accommodations. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then briefly, just my second question has to do with the ethical part of this. And I noted that you called out 3 sustainable development goals. Number 1 was number 11, which was sustainable cities and communities. And I think you actually called out a certain section of that, section 7 on that. And then number 10 was reduce inequalities, and 17, partnerships for goals. Can you just briefly recap how they fit into your presentation again?
So we looked at the SDG goal 11 as the basic human right that is needed for every human being. So we are through our efforts, we improve the infrastructure in the tourism industry by dramatically increasing the number of accessible tourist attractions. So I think that's how it ties into the SDG goal 11. And in terms of education, we focused on reducing the inequalities in terms of the social awareness aspect. We provide awareness training program and media coverage through our collaborations with different influencers, and that's how we aim to level the understanding of how people view people with disabilities. And for our 17th goal, which is the partnership for the goals, I think what's unique about our project is we integrate multiple stakeholders in our efforts to troubleshoot this big social problem. I think this itself is very, very powerful in that we begin to see collective impact as a more effective process for pressing social issues that are that can't be solved by single organizational efforts. So I think this highlights our ethical needs to utilize the expertise of different stakeholders for our problems.
Thank you. Well done. Oh yeah, other comments, questions from our other judges? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I have a question. So the focus I've seen here is on, it seems mainly the infrastructure of the travel. So hotel accommodations, the actual transport, whether that's rental cars, taxis. Is there any thought about outside of official attractions such as restaurants and dining? I mean, I know at least for myself, half of the travel is enjoying the food of where I'm going. Is there potentially a second stage or a portion of the education that would be to drive the local businesses in the area to adopt more friendly dining accommodations and things like that? Or would you say that it would be better to approach it from a legal ordinance standpoint?
Yeah, of course. We also recognize that restaurants could be another potential business for our projects. But since the tourist residence area and also like tour guides and restaurants owners are not really have a high awareness of people with disabilities. So also one of our project is to enhancing our awareness through media and education. And once we complete that mission, then we can also expand our business to restaurants.
Also, I think the potential selling point for our restaurants for other potential customers is that we can help them certify as accessible. I mean, barrier-free facilities in their dining areas, so we can help them market their restaurants as more aware and more more friendly facilities in the future.
And also accessible local restaurants, I think, can be put in the accessible map, and we can provide information about like barrier-free restaurants to many PRMs, and that could be beneficial as well.
Great, thank you.
I'm good. I enjoyed the presentation. I don't really have any questions.
Okay. I got another question. Towards the end of the presentation, you were making the link between the disabilities and then the huge opportunity around senior populations, and that the benefit could be deployed also with those older than 65, even though they might not be completely disabled. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because to me, that could be a huge aspect of the business case for economically for moving in this direction.
Okay, so we highlighted that the links between PRMs and also elderly population, since we can provide accessible tourism projects, and it also benefits seniors who could be reduced mobility in the future. So if we collected data and we become expertise in how dealing with the accessible tourism, then the increasing population of seniors could be also our potential customers with our expertise and also a lot of stakeholders.
Okay, that's good.
I came up with a question came to mind, Joe, if I may.
Sure, please, Chris, please.
Are you all familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act here in the USA?
Yes.
Yes or no?
We briefly researched that your act was passed in like year 1992. So you guys are way ahead of us.
And it has some very sharp teeth in the statute. Are you proposing that something like this would work in Korea? Something with some sharp teeth if people don't abide by the new rules, if the businesses don't comply? What kind of penalty or punishment would you propose?
Actually, Christopher, that's a very valid point. I think when I talked about our legal analysis, that's where we saw the biggest limitations was in our decree, because we had very low enforcement power against facilities that were incompliant to the legal demands. So I think the first stage is to bring forward our enforcement date for our decree. Now, currently the enforcement date, the enforcement year is 2025 and 2030, which is way beyond our PRMs. So we propose that the enforcement year to be brought forward at least 2 or 3 years, because in the US they enforced it like when they passed the law in 1992 and they enforced it in 1993. So I think we need to have like a government intervention which penalizes these facilities to hasten their adoption.
Understood. Good analysis.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts? Okay, if there are none, then this concludes the section where we have answered the Q&A relative to our roles. So we'll take off our ties and unwind and then perhaps share a bit of dialogue and some feedback. So we'll go from there. So I'll start with, again, I just think that this team's done a wonderful job of outlining a clear need. I really like to set up the opening sort of narrative around the fact that we're just coming out of COVID and how we felt being kind of locked in and hunkered down and for many, many months and not able to be free. And the translation to the disabled, where they always feel that way, was touching. And the fact that it's difficult just to even get to the beach to dip your toe into the ocean, which was really effective and certainly got my attention. I also thought that your development into a solid business case with stakeholders involved and bringing the right partners to the table and really outlining, the key actions that need to take place. I thought that was well developed as well. And so I think it's very, very positive. I really don't have much in the way of developmental feedback other than I think just continue with the theme that you started with towards the end is, can you reimagine, a Korea where everyone gets to travel and be free, and imagine, even if as we get older, how much, ease of mind it would have for us if we want to be able to freely travel and enjoy our life and see the beauty of this earth. So I think well done. So I'll pause and let others bring some comments to your direction.
Yeah, great job. Thank you for a great presentation. I agree with Joe's feedback earlier in that I think leaning in heavy on the angle of the elderly is really effective in terms of getting your point across. I don't have many friends that are physically disabled, and so I don't have the same connection to being able to easily relate. However, I have, grandparents, and they have, technically they are disabled, but in my head, I just think, well, they're old. But it's, usually a disability can come with age. And so I think using that to, I think that would be a strong piece of the education portion of your, your walkthrough of what you would be doing in terms of the education portion. I think that would be very, very strong portion, because people would identify with that you may not think that you know very many people that are truly disabled, but they are there, whether you notice them or not. And you might live with somebody who has these same problems. But yeah, no, I loved the presentation of the issues. I love that the solutions were actually very straightforward and reasonable. They weren't so sky high and difficult to achieve that, it is, I wasn't sitting there thinking, how are we going to do this? It was very straightforward, very reasonable, and yeah, great job. Thank you.
You guys are all three bright, shining stars, and I wish you the best of luck, your academic and professional careers. You did a good job today. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
All right. So, well, thank you. Well done.